you're here, so it's good to see some of you. Um, so this morning, I'm going to talk about boundaries, boundarylessness, and authenticity. So uh, for most of my adult life, I was either a mental health counselor or a psychologist. And I help people set boundaries a lot, a lot. And at Zen Center the last 20 years, I've also been helping people set boundaries a lot. The interesting thing is that I'm also a Zen teacher. uh, and I'm also helping people move toward healthy boundarylessness. Now, Ben talked about this in a good talk he gave uh, toward the end of November, which I didn't realize until I had already decided on this. So I'm kind of building on what he said. So I'm helping people move toward healthy boundarylessness, which means increasing a sense of connectedness, so that the boundary between me and something minimizes, and there's an openness. There's a sense of inner being. We say interdependence, but inner being is even better, because interdependence connotes two different objects, and inner being is what boundarylessness is all about. We are all manifestations of inner being, continually continually moving and changing. So Ben last time talked about the Indian woman who became a disciple of Buddha's, and then uh, practiced with him for a long time, Padachara. And I talk about her quite a bit in my first book. So Padachara um, uh, faced incredible trauma. First, her husband died in a very surprising and upsetting way. Of course, not that death isn't in itself. And then her two children died, and she was bereft. She was really boundarylessness. She was just ached. She just ached, and it kind of went mad. And um, here's from my book. Finally, she wandered into Buddha's camp. His disciples found her frightening and appalling. Leave the lunatic alone, his disciples pleaded. Don't get close to her. But Buddha saw that she was so completely broken that she was very close to being whole. Every desire she once cherished, even the desire to follow her own heart, was gone. Any anger she once harbored had long since dissolved. Her mind was gone, but so were her delusions. Buddha rose and moved toward to place himself in Padachara's path. As she approached, he said, "Sister, it is time to recover your presence of mind." Hearing those words, Padachara immediately returned to clarity. It was not just the voice of Buddha that spoke, it was the timeless voice that calls to all beings to wake up. Padachara was able to hear the summons with her whole body and mind. So, in a way, Buddha helped her set a boundary because she was just lost. He helped her set a boundary. He said, "Now it's time to recover your presence of mind." She set a boundary, and she was able to start practicing, and then aspire to to enlightenment, which is, let's say, a more mature form of boundarylessness, a more mature form of boundarylessness. Um, and so she practiced with Buddha, according to this story. And through that, she was able to move from the boundarylessness of total despair, um, developing those boundaries, to a higher form of boundarylessness in which ego died. So here she is again in my book. One day it was raining lightly as Padachara sat alone on a hillside. She became engrossed by the many streamlets of water cascading downward. Some ran quickly, others slowly. Some covered a great distance before being absorbed into the earth, while others lasted only moments. For a long time, Padachara watched as streamlet after streamlet disappeared into the bare ground. Suddenly, her heart opened. In that moment, she finally accepted the death of her family. And here's what she wrote. Bathing my feet, I watched the bath water spill down the slope. I concentrated my mind the way you train a good horse. Then I took a lamp and went into my cell, checked the bed, and sat down on it. I took a needle and pushed the wick down. As the lamp went out, my mind was freed. So I've talked before, more than once, about experiences like this that people have had. Myself, practicing at the Zen monastery in California, and at some point in the middle of a retreat, everything just bursting open, and the death of Tim, and the joy of everything and everyone, seeing and feeling everything and everyone, because that little voice had just vanished, and there was just inner being. Wow. But not even a term, inner being, right? Not even a term. So as a couple days later, I saw my teacher, and he said, "Now you've attained so-called enlightenment. Now take care of those," pointing to my shoes, which kind of annoyed me, actually. I expected him to congratulate me. Instead, he said, "Now take care of those." Well, my shoes, setting about. My shoes are form. Emptiness is form. There are my shoes. I'm inner being with them, but they're also separate objects. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Then after that, about a week after that, I had to go home and see my mother. And my mother had always loved me and been good to me, but her emotional intensity was really high. And sometimes her emotional intensity slurped me up. So I was caught in this primitive kind of boundarylessness. Some of you may have experienced that. I wonder if any of you have never experienced that. So I had to come back, breathe, come back and breathe. So in our meditation, what are we doing? We're forming a boundaried space. It's very limited. We sit on a certain posture. It's kind of tight. It's limited, it's tight, but we're doing that so that we can open into boundarylessness. And that's why Katagiri Roshi calls it he used to call it putting a snake in a bamboo pole. When I say that to people, nobody wants to come to a Zen retreat. What kind of retreat is that? But we do that. We do that. And that's how we feel empowered, not self-punishing, not replicating, giving into authority figures from our childhood. When we do that, instead of our self-powered zazen, our zazen is just giving up and giving in to what we think we should be. Meditation is all about, I can do something. When I was a young man, I began empowering myself for the first time. And in my upper middle class family, I had to say to myself, and ultimately to my father and my grandfather and everybody, I don't want to go to law school. I don't want to go to med school. And when my father finally got despairing, he said, well, at least you could become a dentist. I don't want to become a dentist. My sense of agency, boundaries. We need boundaries. We need a sense of agency. And if we've been traumatized and we carry trauma around, then we really need to work on the boundaries so that we can open up to the higher boundarylessness. So this means that moving between these different levels, we can develop permeable boundaries. That's when we have agency, and that's when we can be authentic. And I want to move on and talk about authenticity. So I talk about three types of middle way. There's the middle way. I'm going to talk about two of the three now and save the third for toward the end. The first two are the Buddha's middle way, the historical Buddha's middle way between austerity and indulgence, between self denial and self aggrandizement. And the Western psychologist middle way, which I got years ago from disciples of Salvador Minuchin. The middle way between getting slurped up, which means you're in self denial. You get slurped up by your family system, by your expectations that people have on you, by the expectations that you have on yourself, by the judgment of others. You get slurped up, you don't have a self anymore. You just get slurped up. And that's really self-denial. That's self-abnegation. That's one edge of the middle. That's the edge of the spectrum. The middle is in between. And the other edge is what? Running, getting disengaged, cutting off, repressing, suppressing. The middle way, engaging. And both Western psychology, the way I've done it for years, and Buddhist psychology, the middle way as a way of engagement. And that's where we find authenticity. Authenticity. And it's a lifetime practice. It's so easy to get slurped up by ideas from our past about who we should be or who we have been or what we might be. And it's so easy to run or hide or just pretend, just be a good Buddha here pretending. But we want to come back to engagement. Engagement is soft. Engagement doesn't know. The other two ends of the spectrum know. Well, you just go along with what everybody tells you to, what your mama told you to, even though it was perverse. Well, my mama didn't tell me to do perverse things. No, she didn't. But you get slurped up by this stuff. Or the other way, you run and hide, or you repress, and you just look like a good Buddha, but inside you're going, ooh. So authenticity, that's what we're going for. But we're not going for it to get something. It's the middle way. It's the gentle way. It's the engaged way. And we don't know. We just do it. And Basho says, the Zen haiku teacher Basho says to his students, don't imitate me. Don't be the other half of a melon. So I'll say that to you. Don't imitate me. Don't be the other half of a melon. Be your own melon. Then you can open up to your melonless less. The melonless less of all life that's included in the melon. And you're permeable. Then you're permeable. Your boundaries are good, but there's give and take. There's back and forth. There's joy and sadness, and there's calmness in that ability to be permeable. So instead of presenting an image so others like us or continually think well of us, clinging to this idea, we just see that and come back to the middle way, come back to being engaged. Instead of being too paralyzed to express our opinion because we think we might get dissed, we just come back, engage as much as we are able to do. Now, if we're too scared, sometimes we're too scared, then we do need to disengage. That's fine. So engagement isn't some final, it's not final, it's just open. It doesn't know anything about final. It doesn't know that it's the one true way because it just is. It just is. Instead of grabbing for something and compromising our core values, settling in, remembering, reminding ourselves of our core value of inner being. If you're a practitioner, that is your core value. That's one of your core values, inner being. So if you're not going with that, if you're violating that, trying to come back to it, trying to come back to it, so that you commit to living authentically with yourself. If you can't live authentically with yourself, you can't live authentically with others. You just can't. So we start by committing to living authentically with ourselves, beyond should or should not. And we begin opening compassionately to whatever comes up, our fear, our anxiety, our desperation. Many feelings have been coming up as this so-called democracy of ours seems to have been kind of falling apart. Many feelings are coming up. Many feelings for all of us. For all of us. Now, here are four things we can do. Here are four things we can do. We can notice what's driving our authenticity. Do we feel we're not smart enough? So I got to be quiet because people know how dumb I am? Or are we feeling unsafe? It'll be unsafe for me to say anything. Or we feel like others have everything and we have nothing, like we're hungry ghosts. I was a hungry ghost when I first went to college. I went to Stanford and I thought, God, these people are so smart. I could never be that smart. Maybe if I sit close to them and just watch what they're reading. I was a hungry ghost trying to get sit next to the smart people, not say anything, but see, maybe I could absorb, moving around from person to person. How did I end up at this school? Well, I only ended up at it because I'm a legacy. And I knew that. I knew that I wasn't really smart enough to get into this school just because of my parents and my grandpa that was there. So I was a hungry ghost. So can you be aware of what's driving your inauthenticity? In order to develop spiritually, can you reflect on and return to your deepest values? After I committed myself to practice, my life cleaned up quite a bit because and it didn't totally clean up. It's still not totally cleaned up because it's a middle way, right? But it cleaned up quite a bit. I didn't drink so much. I didn't want to cheat on tests anymore. When I thought, oh, I'll just copy this guy's test. I thought, oh, that's not in accord with what Suzuki Roshi's teaching. What I'm trying to do is to manifest this deep inner being. So this includes completely letting go of things that the mind is telling us we want. Stop no longer organizing ourselves around craving, organizing ourselves around grasping, shifting the balance from our outer life to our inmost values, to our aspiration. We all have an aspiration. That's why we do this practice patiently and persistently, so we can feel the spaciousness and freedom that is far more precious than what we may have sacrificed. The freedom and spaciousness of just being here, just being engaged. Third, we need to recognize our feelings as we're having them. If we can't recognize our feelings, how can we be authentic? We need to admit also sometimes we don't know how we feel. Boy, with this political thing, my feelings have been just gyrating. I don't know about yours, gyrating from day to day, depending on what's happening. Sometimes I don't know how I feel. I'm authentically admitting that, but I'm overwhelmed by emotions. I'm overwhelmed by images. I'm overwhelmed by inner dialogue. They're all conditioned by our family and our culture and our society, but I can have compassion for my confusion. You guys can have compassion for your confusion. But this means welcoming don't know sometimes. You're not always going to know. You're not always going to know. If you're always knowing, you're either getting slurped up by the values inside you, which come from your family or your culture, and you're not allowing yourself to be a self, or you're cutting off. You're just. So how about throughout each day? How about today, Sunday? Asking yourself if you're being true to your deepest intentions, to your deepest aspirations. How about doing that immediately? Is this how I really want to be now? How about reconnecting over and over to my deepest aspiration, to your deepest aspiration? You have it. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have it. And to the intention that comes from that aspiration. Within this spaciousness, we value boundaries more than ever. My shoes. So at first I was pissed when he said that. I thought, God, well, I won't go into it, but instead of saying, good boy, he said, oh, now you've attained a so-called alignment. Now take care of those. Well, I thought, well, I never would have had to sit for 30,000 hours just to take care of those. But ever since then, shoes, when I take care of them, I feel some connection with my shoes. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm not thinking about them. I'm just thinking, oh, they're precious. Oh, they're precious. Oh, they have all life in them. I can just take care of them. Take care of that little mud. Ooh, wow. Friendliness, love. That's what engagement is about, but we can't force it. That's not authentic. It comes. So here's some points for your reflection. One, you might want to make a list of what causes you to act or feel inauthentic. It's almost always related to boundarylessness in the lower sense, or rigid hiding or running, in which it's a rigid boundary. So it's very seldom a permeable boundary. It's almost always giving in or hiding or running away instead of the permeability of engagement. So notice that, and make a list if you'd like. Why not? Practice reconciling the war of opposites. Now you've heard me talk about engaged and authentic. So, oh, now you want to be authentic. And oh, I'm inauthentic. I need to practice being authentic. Authentic. Oh, authentic, inauthentic. Two words, two ends of a continuum. Authentic, inauthentic. Engaged, disengaged. Two ends of a continuum. So now we come to the third middle way. Nagarjuna is the Prajnaparamita middle way. That middle way is that's called the empty middle way, because both sides are the middle. Each end is the middle, and the middle is the middle. Engaged, disengaged, enmeshed, it's all the middle, because we don't divide it up. We're just with it. So usually we get caught by one limited truth. And in Mahayana Buddhism, we say, if we can notice that one limited truth, then can we incorporate its opposite? And can we incorporate both of them? And can we let go of both of them? The fourfold tetralemma. So let's do a little bit of practice in the fourfold tetralemma, if you feel like it. So I bet that each of you, I see I don't have you on gallery. I'm going to put you on gallery so I can see some of you at least. So one limiting truth that most of us are feeling, if we're living in this country, is that we're anxious about what's happening. We're anxious about what's been happening, and we're still anxious. Right? Inauguration day. Ah, between now and inauguration date, what the potential riots today? We're anxious. We're anxious. So let's do a little exercise about that. That's a truth of ours that we're anxious, but it's only one out of four truths. So why don't you take, well, you're already in an upright position. So I'll do a little 3-4 minute guided meditation here. Why don't you start by taking 2 or 3 breaths? And then as you're taking your 2 or 3 breaths, you might want to open to your anxiety about what's happening in our country, in our dear country that we all care so much about. Your anxiety about what's happening, opening up to it, breathing into it. Whatever images come up, just being with them. Whatever feelings come up, just being with them. And now, as you're ready, you might just want to release. You might want to open. You might want to let go. You might want to take a cleansing breath. And as you take your next 2 or 3 breaths, you might want to open up to no anxiety. The fact that you're sitting here and you've been sitting here quietly for all this time means that there's a freedom here. There's also no anxiety. Can you just open up to that with the next 2 or 3 breaths and breathe into it? No anxiety. And then when you're ready, releasing yourself, taking a nice cleansing breath, opening, letting go, a nice cleansing breath, opening, letting go. Now, how about in the next few breaths, welcoming both anxiety and no anxiety? They were with you a few minutes ago. Bring them back in. They're here anyway. Hold them together. Breathe together with your anxiety and your no anxiety. Is there room for both of them in the spaciousness of your great being, anxiety and no anxiety? 2 or 3 more breaths with anxiety and no anxiety. And then when you're ready, taking all the time you need, take another cleansing breath. Open and let go. Open and let go. And now finally, ready to move on to the next one. 2 or 3 cleansing breaths. And neither anxiety nor not anxiety. Those are just labels. They're just labels. Can you open up to neither anxiety nor no anxiety? You're not dissing anything. You're just opening even farther to just this, to neither anxiety nor no anxiety. 2 or 3 more nice breaths with neither anxiety or no anxiety. Don't need to divide it up. Don't need to divide it up. And then, as you're ready, a nice cleansing breath and come back to the room. And look at me when you're ready so that I'll know it's time for me to start talking again. So this is Mahayana Buddhism. You don't have to take a course in Mahayana Buddhism, you just practice it, right? The discord of these two opposites melts into concord. Wow. The battles become dances. They become dances. The old enemies become lovers. The old enemies become lovers. Then there's a natural friendliness that comes up. A natural friendliness that comes up, which we don't need to try to be authentic about. It just comes up. Just comes up. So this is about practicing bare awareness of who we are. Yes to the negativity when it comes up, not repressing it, not stuffing it. Yes to the don't know when the don't know comes up. When the concern is sufficiently opened up to, the negative emotional energies dissipate. They go. Gate. They go. And there's a resolution. There's a resolution. Once this acceptance is total, there's some natural humility develops. It just develops. You realize, you don't have it all. You're not the great Zen master or Zen disciple. You're just, because you've got the four ways of being as part of your being, the tetralemma. And you can be authentic within that. The more we practice, the more we can develop permeable boundaries. The more we can enjoy permeable boundaries, the more authentic we are, not getting caught by one side or the other. But when we do get caught, noticing that, being with that, sometimes we're just going to be caught. But if we engage with that caughtness, it becomes uncaughtness. If we non-judgmentally, kindly engage in either side, we see that it's all the empty middle. Empty because it's full. Don't get caught on empty. Everybody gets caught on empty. The full empty middle. The empty full middle, right? Empty because it's empty of its own being. That's all. Asvabaha in Sanskrit. That's what empty means. No without svabaha, own being. Nothing has its own being because everything is inner being. The more we practice, the more we can enjoy permeable boundaries. The more we enjoy permeable boundaries, the more we're natural. We're just natural. We don't have to even try to be authentic. So that's what I'd like to say for today. And I'll be glad to take any questions or comments from anyone.